Howdy folks, I'm Southern Wolf of Southern Wolf Studios. Welcome back to Magical Eyes Red is for Anguish. Now last time we read a little bit of the life of a woman by the name of, I gotta look at my notes, Murase Tomomi. A little bit foreboding, we'll see how that ends up. Let's get back into it though. On an arterial road at 2 in the morning. This section of the road has been closed off due to suddenly announced construction and is now cloaked in piercing silence. If construction work was progressing according to schedule, the construction crew should be rushing to complete it right now. But there are no workers or construction vehicles to be seen. There is instead a boy seemingly in his late teens. He has one good reason to be staying in this particular location. He's waiting for Murase Tomomi, the Type B variant and the woman whose body is now her vessel, in order to turn both of them back into the way they belong. And by turning back, it doesn't mean that he's going to perform any out-of-the-box repairs or healing methods here. Engagement, destruction, dismantlement. And given the strength she possesses, he's not likely to escape this encounter unscathed either. It's clear enough to see around here without moonlight, but the moon is covered by somber clouds of night. Even so, although it's not as bright as daylight, the perimeter streetlights offer enough luminescence to afford a good view. He's able to recognize everything from a littered empty can to a tiny rock that is hardly noticeable without intensely strong focus. Since he deeply understands that the enemy ahead of him won't be brought down deeply, he considers every scrap of information about his surroundings valuable. While concentrating all his attention on his surroundings, he tries to recall what was written in Murase Tomomi's file. On the last date of her journal, there had been an entry about a telephone conversation she had with her grandmother. Her grandmother urged her to take more care about herself. Having received those words, grateful for the affection towards her, she instead decided to put her grandmother above anything else. Conversations such as this must have been repeated countlessly over the years between these two, who cared so deeply for each other. He can't accept the unfairness that she'd been subjected to. How could anyone except her possibly tell how valuable her life was just by reading a series of letters? However, it ended, and that was the direction in life she had made it up in her mind to take. But, nonetheless, now that her journal has concluded in unfortunate, unfavorable ways, why would she ever need to bear more irrationality on her shoulders? The thoughts in her mind must have been twisted, but they shouldn't have been something impure that could harm other people. The young man sets his heart on getting his job done. He just happens to be involved in this case. But if there's one thing he's responsible for, it's to end everything once and for all. Right here and now. Just like he always does. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. That's an extremely primitive, simple providence of nature. Denying everything disallowed to exist. Returning everything to where it belongs. That is a solemn task. And the ashes and dust that he faces are now known as variants. They are what excessive human emotions end up becoming after the process defined as death. Just as a light too bright may burn out one's retinas, too much of any good thing can be toxic to humans, even if it should have the invisible form of one's emotions. While there were a large variety of forms of classes of variants, they shared one common reason of existence. They only exist in order to make their wishes come true. In the case of Murase Tomomi, the wish is presumably to see her grandmother again. Were it realized, everything would be immediately resolved. When you lack intelligence on the opponent's strength and don't want to put yourself at risk, Any way to settle things without a direct confrontation would be ideal. However, it's obviously impossible to take that option here. Her grandmother, the only water capable of quenching her intense thirst, is already gone. And that fact leaves no easy outs for the boy. Then what does he do? The only choice remaining is to break the target down using superior strength. Needless to say, however strong they might be, fists can never damage something intangible as emotion, or so ordinary people would think. The young man is capable of making that happen. He is not only one of the extraordinary people out there that can do such unrealistic things, but he's also one of the most talented at fighting among them. A person who exceptionally parallels that of variance. That's what he truly is. The road that is normally teeming with long hauling trucks around the clock is still shrouded in this thick silence. To be more precise, the silence dominating his surroundings has grown deeper than a couple of minutes ago. His target is just around the corner, and all living things follow their instincts to flee from the perimeter. The engagement is undoubtedly going to commence at this place in a minute or two. Despite being such an intense situation, the young man has already gotten himself into a perfectly calm mind. The number of streetlights in his sight, and the distance between each of them, and even the irregularity of the road's surface that seems perfectly flat, he has a grasp of every land feature in every direction that can be used during the incoming battle. He likes the fact there are no potential obstructions nearby, such as residents or stores. You can say that this is one of the best locations for his characteristic features to work into their fullest. As long as in this well-prepared environment and the target is a Type B, the chances of him going down are slim to none. It's neither flippancy nor arrogance, it's a mere certainty. Not bad. He appreciates how the coordinates were able to pick up such an optimal location for him out of such a short notice. But if you must voice one complaint, knowing that no one can do anything about it. I wish the moons and the stars were visible. That would be it. On the surface of the dark gray road, he doesn't lament over the cloudy sky for the sake of himself, for the sake of his intimate target. For the sake of the variant, which now becomes visibly recognizable earlier than he calculated, which used to be addressed as Murase Tomomi. He hopes that, unlike her initial end of life in that solitarily poorly lit apartment of hers, he can at least see her see something prettier at the moment of her second ending. The variant who will never know about his audacity is now nearly close enough for him to make out her facial expressions. The Type B variant doesn't possess their own flesh and blood. They need to find themselves a host. Murase Tomomi has chosen this charmingly short-haired, slim woman. Though he only saw a picture of the adjective, he feels that the two women have some physically traits in common. She seems without significant injuries, but it's hard to gauge how much time has passed since she was possessed. At minimum, her feet are dirty and she's missing one shoe. The two shadows face each other down on the deserted road. There's nothing in their way. A boy and the variant. Which one is the hunter, and which one is the hunted? The answer will be evident soon. Slowly yet steadily the woman walks towards him, and the distance between the two shortens without fail. 5. They're a little over 10 meters apart. 4. From the distance he can see her clothing is slightly too light for this town and for this time of year. 3. While the city is still in its early stages of spring, Y City from which she came must be somewhere higher in temperature. 2. So as to stay relaxed, he's letting some of the random thoughts come and go while accurately measuring the distance from her. 1. And his inner countdown is about to reach its end. 0. Right after letting out a breath, he takes off running. Unlike martial arts matches, there's no signal telling when to commence the fight. Therefore, the first strike is of utmost importance. His speed is as swift as the wind. For someone without any knowledge of him witnessing this, they would surely describe him as nothing but inhuman. He closes the interval at an overwhelmingly beyond human velocity. Typically, his next move would be an instant strike to one of his opponent's pressure points. But this time he isn't going to bother due to the complex lack of input on her abilities and the vessel's physical fragility. The two fighters are already close enough to deliver blows to each other after a single step forward. Breaking off his straight approach, he switches over to a curved linear motion and grabs a hold of her right wrist. He then uses his momentum to generate the switch over to sharply spin around the back of the opponent. Now that strikes are out of the question, there aren't many options left. Out of those limited alternatives, he chose a commonly used joint lock technique that is boring yet highly effective. At that moment, he's convinced that he just needs to apply more pressure. Ugh. He finds his body up in the air even though he's the one that took the first move. It was an inconceivably powerful throw considering how slender the one who performed it is. In spite of this fact, the joint lock technique was halfway through. Just one wave of the arm set a man of 70-odd kilograms up mid-air, as if throwing a baseball. Well, that's like, what, 150-something, 160-something pounds? Reorientating himself up in the air, he lands on the concrete ground as though nothing had happened. He hasn't taken any damage. His impression from the first move is, honestly, not too good. The target's combat capability is within range of predictions. There's probability of no real risk to himself. However, he'll have a hard time dealing with the vessel girl. He can sense that had he forced himself into getting the locking technique done, her right hand would have certainly come off. Her tendons and joints aren't at the level of her superhuman strength bestowed upon her by the variants. Since that's the case, no more brutal attacks are allowed, or else it's blindingly apparent how her body will end up. Yeah, in pieces. Whoa. She suddenly jumps up. The way of kicking off the ground looks as good as that of a professional athlete. Before he can think of the next move, she seems to want to go on the offense now. The interval between them disappears in the blink of an eye, and he can clearly sense her hostility towards him. The shivering atmosphere makes him back off right before her strike. Ooh. Her lethal blow punches through the air, right where his head had been at moments before. Fortunately for him, she appears to have recognized him as an obstacle to dispose of. So far, so good. Basically, once a variant recognizes you as a threat, they will stick to you until you're out of their perceivable range. Since Murase Tomomi's attention is now fully fixed on the boy, as long as he remains close to her, there's little to no risk of her escaping into a nearby residential street or causing some other disaster like that. In fact, she's now on a stage which only the winner is allowed to leave. All that's left is for the boy to complete his assignment. She shoots him a rain of blows literally without a break. None of them are executed along the lines of any martial art forms. She simply strikes as hard and as strong as she can, but each attack is brutal enough to easily snuff out a human life. Damn! While the boy is easily capable of dodging them, he knows that performing those furious assaults must be taking its toll on the vessel's body, which leaves him only one choice. Guess it's about time. He exhales slowly to lower his oxygen level. His next move requires accurate control of his breathing. Ridding anything unnecessary from the inside of his body, he leaves his fighting pose and relaxes his muscles. What remains unchanged is a sensation of tension extended inside his body like a net. What he's about to do could look like some sort of suicidal act. The right hand, left hand, right foot, and then left foot. Well, that storm-like self-preservation response of hers seems to no end. He slowly steps directly towards the raging onslaught, completely defenseless, as though he's enjoying a casual walk. In the next instant, a burst of sound runs in the dark of the night. An intense heat can be felt on his shoulders. An attack is a knife-hand strike that can crack the clavicle and shoulder blades of an ordinary person. Holy shit. Actually, the clavicle, that's your collarbone. That's actually a fairly weak bone to break. But the shoulder blade? Damn. The boy's second move is to purposely receive the blow. However, it's a completely different matter from a strategy of losing the battle to win the war. Low risk, yet high return. His idea is the unbalancing technique called twist, that works only when strikes are coming from above and front. In the course of this technique, the performer's body functions as a screw, and the ground as a wall into which it is installed. At the moment of physical contact with the opposing combatant, the performer gives their own body a slight twist and creates a helical route that channels the impact of the attack through their feet into the ground. The key to success is enormously accurate timing. Quite surprisingly, the boy perfectly parries the impact without any change in his expression. Not only is there no effect on any part of his own body, but even his clothes remain intact. But even if that was the case, the biggest benefit of the shock-absorbing technique is that the source of impact doesn't take any rebounding damage from either the technique nor their own attack, which means that he can unbalance her without inflicting any physical harm. The more powerful the attack is, the more unbalanced the attacker gets. It's as good as punching the air with the utmost effort. Unsteadied by the expectant response of the boy, the vessel falls towards him, one leg back in midair. However physically abnormal she may be due to the variant's control, she can hardly maintain her standing posture on one foot. There's no way he's going to miss this opportunity. After carefully estimating the adequate degree of restraint, he sets his sights on the exposed solar plexus and then fires a blow. He hears an unexpectedly dull sound. It is the boy, the one who attacked, that received the greatest amount of its force. Unlike his first move, that blow wasn't for the sake of finding out more about her strength. With any luck, it could have been decisive, but it was completely blocked by a variant part of hers. She returns a right punch to his midsection but sweeps it to the side. Before thinking about what happens, he kicks off the ground to gain distance and manage to avoid any further damage. Both combatants look outwardly fine after the instant exchange of blows, but he feels a light numbness in his right shoulder and hand. Had he taken the attack without any precautions and used all his strength, he would have been hurt even worse. Things have turned out well as an incidental result of him being considerate enough to go easy on the vessel's body. However, this exchange helped him understand the strangeness he sensed when he snatched at her wrist earlier. It's another attribute unique to the variants. Their strengths are proportional to the strengths of their base emotions. Their characteristics are determined according to the kind of their base emotions. The boy thinks that if what triggered her transformation is her deep affection towards her grandmother, what she has been given by her variant powers is quite appropriate. The surface of Murase Tomomi's skin as a variant possesses a beyond human solidity. It's probably an embodiment of her unyielding, unbreakable will for her deceased family member. And it is now hard as steel. It's too hard for a normal human being to crack easily. The discovery of her superpower means a lot to him. The variant's power derives from an intangible thing called emotions and breaks down into a number of categories. For one, it is a venom dissolving everything. Another, it's a blade smashing apart everything. Just one single misjudgment on it can dictate his assignment outcome and even his own lifespan. tries to put together the pieces that he found out about her so far. Power is solidarity. However, it's no more than skin deep, and her joints and the rest of her remain unenhanced. And on top of that, he already has a concrete grasp of the muscle strength in her arms and legs. Even if there may still be some uncertainties, he has already learned more than enough to easily checkmate his opponent. That is the best fighting style for him, one who doesn't possess incredible speed or strength. All he has to do is watch for a chance to draw her into his game plan. The variant has now re-established herself and is charging towards him at unimaginable speed for a girl of slight build. Her fierce and straightforward approach is easy to predict. If she ever had any martial arts experience during her lifetime, some kind of feint could be expected, but there were no records indicating that in her file. Once you turn into a variant, you no longer develop in any way. You before death experiences are everything you can rely on skill-wise. Keeping her at the most effective distance from him, he continues provoking her to attack. If he were to get further from her than necessary, she would definitely forcefully chase after him, straining her body further. Rather than growing weaker, her attacks are steadily becoming harder and faster. If he were to take a hit, it would most certainly be fatal. Even with luck, long-lasting damage would be inevitable. However, at least in her solitary power isn't of any use unless she succeeds in directly hitting him. Even if she uses it for her defense, it will probably protect her from things like bullets and knives, but it won't stop him. Put it in another way, this variant Murase Tomomi is no longer a threat to him. Her steely fist swiftly grazed his cheek. Her subsequent vicious blows are all evaded, and the boy notices a cold, heavy feeling on his back. Alright. Should his calculations be correct, this fight will be as good as over the moment she makes her next move. Without ever realizing his true intentions, she shoots out a left-handed slap, switching his backwards evasion over to a sudden flight towards her left. The slap meant for the boy only runs through the air and winds up hitting a streetlight behind him. The pole is bent over as though making the light bow. The variant should have realized at that point how she possessed striking power that can wreck steel poles, and how surreal it was for the boy without any injuries despite that direct hit from her attack several minutes ago. Being incapable of becoming aware of things normal people would be aware of. That was one of the weaknesses inherent to variants of Type B and under. They lack the ability to think and imagine. He aims a light kick towards the back of her knee and her pivot foot, which bears all her weight. She loses her balance and collapses. He's aware that such a basic unbalancing won't keep a variant down any longer than a breath. However, he has a move that can be executed in an even shorter amount of time. In both hands, he's holding tiny rocks that he picked up before the beginning of this engagement. Taking a step away from her, he hurls the rock at her head. She cannot evade them because of her fall, but just as with the knee-back kick, his goal isn't to inflict any damage. It is to hit a sore spot of her incredibly high response speed. The variants in the middle class or under don't have those sorts of intelligence that enable them to decide to sacrifice something trivial to achieve something great. Just as predicted, the variant jerks her upper body in an unimaginable velocity and hits the hurled rock towards the ground. And then, with all those supernatural emotions, the momentum of her strike causes her unceremoniously to fall to one knee. Most assuredly, when the danger and immediate response is required, we use our dominant arm. Whether it be a human being or a variant, it is an action based on biological instinct. He has, of course, learned her handedness from the briefing. Every move that she's been trying to make so far has made her completely lose her balance by making her forcefully shift her weight in a precarious position. He moves behind the defenseless woman. He needs to concentrate about 2 seconds in order to activate a certain power of his own. The variant quickly turns around to face him and tries to do something, but it's already too late. There is no longer any ways even someone as yet unknown abilities left to protect herself from what's coming. This is checkmate. All he has to do is place his right hand upon the woman straight in front of him. What he's going to do isn't something to be glad about after all. Considering that, he decides to content himself with the fact that he managed to avoid excess damage to the vessel's body, except for the joint of her right wrist. At that very moment of his last move, he stamps the target's name, Murase Tomomi, into his mind, as he always does. He believes that is the very least he can do for those who meet their end by his hands. And then, as if praying, whose restful sleep was taken by her own unbearably strong emotions, could now truly find peace. He thrust out his right arm. Okay, well then, that was something. I'd like to thank you all so very much for watching. If you like this, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and I hope to see you all next time.